You ever feel the heat press down so hard on your skin it feels like you're wrapped in a blanket of lava? That's exactly what the June heatwave felt like in Brighton Hollow, a suburban HOA-run community where every lawn was cut to precisely 1.5 inches, every mailbox had a regulation brass number, and every homeowner lived under the tyrannical rule of our HOA president, Karen Delaney. I'm Nate Reynolds, 32. Former HVAC technician turned systems analyst. And the proud owner of 749 Willow Birch Way, a modest but beautiful single-story ranch home with a platinum-level central air conditioning system that I personally installed, maintained, and, thanks to a bit of foresight, insured with the most ironclad warranty you could imagine. Karen, on the other hand? She was the kind of woman who wore matching pastel suits to walk her poodle and carried a clipboard with enough fervor to rival a building inspector. She didn't live on my street, no, that would be too direct. She lived 2 blocks over in the largest house in the HOA, a gift from her second ex-husband and a constant reminder that money doesn't buy class or common sense. Now, I'd kept my nose clean. Paid my dues. Kept my yard trimmed, my paint within regulation shades, and even joined one of the more boring subcommittees to show I wasn't a troublemaker. But the moment Karen caught wind that I had installed a non-standard external unit behind my home, despite it being fully compliant and hidden by lattice fencing, she made it her personal mission to make my life a living furnace. It began subtly. A notice tucked into my mailbox about unregistered mechanical alterations. I responded with copies of my permits and warranty paperwork. Then came the drive-by photos. Karen snapping shots from the sidewalk while pretending to check her smartwatch. I waved. She didn't wave back. Next came the letters. Certified ones. Citing obscure bylaws about aesthetics, airflow disruptions, and, get this, potential noise pollution during nap hours. My AC unit, which I had custom-tuned to run at whisper-quiet levels, couldn't have woken a flea. But Karen wasn't after facts. She was after control. Then came the day. It was 106 degrees outside. Humidity thick enough to chew. I came home from work, shirt clinging to my back, only to step into an indoor sauna. The thermostat blinked in panic, 90 degrees and climbing. I sprinted to the backyard. Gone. The entire AC unit, pipes, compressor, electrical housing, ripped clean from its platform like it had never existed. At first, I thought it was theft. I grabbed my phone to call the police but stopped when I noticed something on the ground, a crumpled notice from the HOA with Karen's signature in thick black ink. Unit removed due to noncompliance. Emergency enforcement per Section 9C of the Brighton Hollow Appearance Standards. I stared. My fingers shook. Then I laughed. Not the good kind of laugh. The kind of laugh you make when you're about to unravel someone with precision. Because Karen didn't know that Section 9C required a hearing, one she never held. And more importantly, that unit? It was insured under a platinum warranty with full tamper protection. And the clause was clear: any unauthorized removal by a third party would trigger full legal liability. And oh, did I have receipts? I called the warranty company. Sent the photos. Forwarded Karen's note. By morning, I had an email from the company's legal team. Not only were they pressing charges for vandalism and unauthorized tampering, but they were also filing a claim to recoup damages from the entity responsible, which, in this case, was the HOA, and by signature, Karen. You'd think this would slow her down. It didn't. The next day, Karen doubled down, called a neighborhood emergency session where she passed around color photos of my, now missing, unit with red arrows and big captions like neighborhood safety hazard and illegal installation. I wasn't invited to the meeting. But I was watching it. From my security camera feed, which I had set up 6 months earlier in anticipation of exactly this kind of behavior. Karen didn't know I'd caught her on camera, wearing gloves, directing a hired hand with a wrench, personally supervising the removal. She even posed with the unit in her trunk before driving off. That's when I knew. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was war. By the next morning, Brighton Hollow was buzzing like a beehive kicked by a lawnmower. Karen had already deployed her damage control team, which, in reality, meant a chain of passive-aggressive group texts and a special edition HOA newsletter. In it, she tried to spin the story, painting me as a rogue installer of black market machinery and herself as the vigilant guardian of suburban peace. What she didn't account for was the storm heading her way. Not just from me, but from the Platinum Warranty Legal Division of Aerotemp Industries. And when they came, they didn't knock gently. The letter hit the HOA mailbox by noon. Registered, stamped, and wrapped in more legal jargon than a real estate textbook. Karen probably had a meltdown right there on the granite steps of the HOA office. See, Aerotemp wasn't some fly-by-night company. They were top-tier in HVAC systems, with a legal team trained in high-impact corporate litigation. And they were furious. The claim, $23,800 in damages, plus penalties. The defendant, Brighton Hollow HOA and its acting enforcement agent, specifically named as Karen Delaney. You could hear a pin drop in the HOA WhatsApp group when that little tidbit leaked. Karen tried to go dark after that. But silence wasn't enough, not with the momentum building on my side. Neighbors started whispering. Some even came by to apologize for not standing up sooner. One woman, Amanda, slipped me a USB drive. "This has some interesting footage," she said. "Karen's yard camera caught more than just squirrels last week." I plugged it in that night. What I saw made my jaw clench. Karen, after removing my AC, had driven it across the neighborhood, stopped at her cousin's house, and installed it there. My unit. The one I paid for, tuned, registered, and insured. Right there on the side of a pastel yellow bungalow with peeling shutters and a live laugh love plaque swinging in the wind. I took screenshots. Lots of them. And then I called Aerotemp's legal rep again. "New development," I said. "She's not just a vandal. She's a thief." It only got worse from there. 2 days later, Karen's driveway was sealed off with orange cones. Rumor had it the HOA's lawyer had advised her to avoid all contact with me. But Karen couldn't help herself. Power was her oxygen, and I had just yanked the mask off her face. She started pushing new proposals at emergency HOA meetings. Outrageous ones. Things like mandatory appliance audits, and weekly home inspections for code adherence. It was a last-ditch attempt to tighten her grip before it slipped entirely. I attended the next meeting in person, just for fun. I showed up with my documents, the USB footage, and my best poker face. Karen spotted me from the front of the room and froze. Her voice cracked during her opening remarks. And when I pulled out the printed warranty, full color, with the clause circled in red ink, and laid it gently on the folding table in front of her, she fainted. I'm not exaggerating. The woman went pale, swayed on her pumps, and collapsed like a paper doll in a windstorm. The room gasped. Rick, the treasurer, knocked over a potted fern trying to catch her. Her vice president tried fanning her with the HOA charter. Someone yelled, "Get water." But I stayed seated. Calm. Quiet. When she came to, Karen didn't speak. She couldn't. Because the evidence I'd just presented didn't just prove her actions were illegal, it proved she had committed insurance fraud, property theft, and violated at least 6 HOA bylaws in her own charter. I stood, tapped the edge of the table, and said, "This isn't personal, Karen. But this is far from over." The next day, her cousin's house mysteriously lost power. By the end of the week, the HOA quietly issued a statement claiming Karen was taking a leave of absence for health reasons. But I wasn't done yet. Because while Karen was busy trying to keep her empire from crumbling, I was laying the groundwork to buy the very mortgage she lived under. You heard me. You won't believe how I pulled that off, and what I turned her backyard into. Karen may have gone underground, but chaos never sleeps in Brighton Hollow. Especially when you've humiliated the queen bee of suburban control. Her absence left a power vacuum, and the remaining HOA board, Rick, Denise, and that guy who always wears socks with sandals, didn't know how to function without her marching orders. Meanwhile, I was thriving. The HOA tried to quietly pay off part of the claim from Aerotemp, but that only scratched the surface. Their insurance balked. Turns out, Karen had submitted a false report listing the unit as unclaimed property, a technical lie that sent up more red flags than a clearance sale at a Soviet surplus store. And the best part? She used HOA funds to pay the contractor who removed it. Which meant every homeowner was now on the hook for her little revenge project. Neighbors who used to sip lemonade and gossip with her now avoided eye contact in the cul-de-sac. Some even began peeling those ridiculous proud HOA resident decals off their mailboxes. But Karen? She wasn't done. One morning I walked outside to find a fresh line of white paint across the entrance of my driveway. A notice was staked into the lawn, pending committee approval, community sidewalk expansion, access to be rerouted. Expect construction delays. It was absurd. Brighton Hollow had no sidewalk expansion plans. I checked with the city. Nothing. No permits, no projects. This was 100% Karen. I could practically see her in her floral blouse, painting the line herself at 2 a.m., cackling about community beautification. So I called a contractor friend, Barry, and we had some fun. By sundown, my driveway was freshly repaved with reinforced concrete and a layer of industrial sealant. Smooth as butter. Impenetrable. The painted line? Gone. Replaced with a charming sign. Private property, trespassers will be named. 2 days later, Karen returned from her mysterious health leave. Her first act? Try to tow my car for blocking a future sidewalk. But her plan backfired, hilariously. The tow truck backed into my new fence post, one I had legally installed right at the edge of my property line. The post wasn't going anywhere. And neither was Karen's car. See, in her rush to investigate me, Karen had parked illegally, across 2 driveways and on a red curb. When the tow truck clipped my fence, it blocked her own vehicle in. She stood there, screaming into her phone, as the driver cursed and refused to refund her deposit. I stepped out with a cup of coffee. "Everything all right, Karen?" She turned slowly, her face a shade of crimson somewhere between rage and embarrassment. "You think this is funny?" "I think it's poetic," I said, sipping calmly. "Your car, trapped by the same fences you tried to control everyone else with? That's art. But the real masterpiece? That came a week later. I had been doing some digging, not just legal digging, but financial. And I found something fascinating. Karen's house? It wasn't fully owned. In fact, it was sitting under a secondary mortgage, one quietly sold off to a private equity firm last year to cover Karen's home improvements, read, kitchen remodel and a waterfall fountain that never worked. And guess who had a friend at that firm? Me. His name was Alex. We went to trade school together before I switched to IT. I made some calls, offered a cash buyout, and within 3 days, I owned the note on Karen Delaney's mortgage. That's when the power dynamic shifted from petty war to nuclear option. I didn't move fast. I didn't want to spook her. I waited. I let her send another violation notice, this time for excessive fence enthusiasm. Whatever that meant. Then I sent her a certified letter. It simply read, "Karen Delaney, as the current holder of the mortgage deed for 302 Willow Birch Circle, please be advised that terms of occupancy are now subject to review. A default assessment has been initiated. See enclosed documents." I didn't have to evict her. Yet. But I'd placed a legal sword of Damocles over her perfectly symmetrical crown molding, and she knew it. Karen tried to retaliate with a cease and desist letter, hand-delivered by her nephew. But her face when she saw my signature on the official mortgage documents? That was the second time she nearly fainted. The HOA had to call an emergency meeting. She didn't show up. Because she wasn't in her house anymore. She'd locked herself in her cousin's guest room and refused to come outside. Meanwhile, I walked her property line with a clipboard and a smile. Because I wasn't just taking her down, I was planning what would rise in her place. The funny thing about power? It only works if people believe in it. And after Karen Delaney disappeared into her cousin's guest room, the spell broke. No one was afraid anymore. The HOA board began unraveling. Rick quietly resigned. Denise tried to take over but got shut down when she accidentally emailed the community's financial statements, exposing that nearly $12,000 had been reallocated to administrative expenditures, including a catered brunch Karen threw for her birthday. That birthday was the same day she ordered my AC unit removed. Ironic. Neighbors started organizing, not HOA meetings, but lawn chair sessions on driveways. One guy started a newsletter called The Unofficial Hollow, complete with HOA horror stories and memes about Karen's clipboard being a cursed artifact. But me? I wasn't just basking in her downfall. I had plans. I now held the mortgage note to her home. And while I had the legal right to foreclose if she defaulted, which, based on her financials, was about 6 weeks away, I didn't want the house. I wanted to make a point. So I made her an offer. In exchange for surrendering her position in the HOA permanently, dropping all pending complaints, and issuing a public statement acknowledging her misconduct, I would personally forgive the remainder of her mortgage. It wasn't just leverage. It was mercy. She refused. Of course she did. 2 days later, her bank froze her escrow account after Aerotemp's legal team issued a separate claim against her directly for equipment theft. Apparently, trying to resell a stolen HVAC unit to your cousin makes you liable for breach of warranty, plus damages. Suddenly, Karen wasn't answering calls. Then the strangest thing happened. She returned to the neighborhood, not to defend herself, but to hold a yard sale. It was surreal. There she stood, under a makeshift pop-up tent, selling decorative wreaths and garden gnomes while avoiding eye contact with anyone. Her Lexus was missing. Her usual air of superiority replaced by desperation. But then came the final twist. A neighbor named Mr. Hanley, retired landscape architect and local legend for growing heirloom tomatoes the size of small dogs, approached me. "I've got an idea," he said. "Something poetic." The idea? Turn Karen's property into a neighborhood garden. The deed transfer would be straightforward. With her default imminent, I could legally initiate foreclosure. But if she voluntarily signed over the property in exchange for full debt forgiveness and immunity from Aerotemp's civil suit, she could walk away. We drafted the paperwork. She took 2 days. On the third morning, Karen appeared at my door. No clipboard. No pastel pantsuit. Just a folder and an apology. "I never thought it would end like this," she said, voice barely audible. "But I guess I forgot this place wasn't mine to control." I didn't respond right away. I just pointed to the signature line. She signed. Just like that, Karen Delaney, former HOA president, tyrant of thermostats, destroyer of summer comfort, was officially out. And 302 Willow Birch Circle became something else entirely. By the next month, raised beds were installed. Kids planted sunflowers. A path of river stones curved where her hedge once stood. The AC platform she tore out? It now supported a bee house made from reclaimed cedar. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years showed up with gloves and lemonade. And the plaque at the front? Karen's Garden. A reminder that power should grow things, not tear them out. Brighton Hollow bloomed. Not just with vegetables and perennials, but with the kind of peace no one had known in years. Kids played tag in open yards. Neighbors waved again. HOA board meetings became optional, more potluck than policy. And Karen? Gone. The whispers said she moved in with her sister somewhere 2 towns over. Others claimed she was renting a condo with strict rules and no nonsense, words that probably made her feel right at home. Either way, she was no longer our problem. Or so we thought. 2 months after the garden was finished, a white envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name in looping cursive. Inside was a single page. Dear Mr. Reynolds, congratulations on your little garden project. I suppose I should be flattered you named it after me. But I've always believed that petty people need their trophies, even if they're made of dirt and cucumbers. So enjoy your tomatoes, your bees, and your smug little plaque. You may have won this battle, but Brighton Hollow is always mine. Sincerely, K. Delaney. I stared at the letter for a long time. It didn't anger me. It didn't worry me. It confirmed something I already knew. Karen couldn't let go. So I leaned in. I made a call to a friend of mine, Jill, a podcast producer for a national show about suburban life and small-town feuds. She loved my story. Said it had everything: villainy, justice, air conditioning, even redemption. Within a week, the podcast aired, The War on Willow Birch, How a Thermostat Toppled a Tyrant. It exploded. Thousands of downloads. Hundreds of comments. Stories poured in from across the country, people who had faced down their own Karens, their own HOA nightmares. But the twist? A few days later, I got a call from a law professor in New Hampshire. He'd heard the podcast and wanted to use the case in his curriculum. As an example of what? Modern property warfare, he said, chuckling. And poetic justice. But it didn't stop there. A local newspaper picked up the story. Then a city councilman dropped by the garden one morning with a film crew. The plaque? They wanted to turn it into a historical marker. Karen's garden was now officially, legally, part of the town's registry of community landmarks. Karen's name would live on, not in HOA bylaws or newsletters, but as the namesake of the very thing she tried to destroy. You could almost hear her scream from miles away. And me? I sleep like a baby. Because every time I step into that garden, breathe in the basil and marigold and fresh earth, I remember the sweltering days she tried to rip out my air. And I smile. Because she gave me so much more than heat. She gave me legacy.